So today we are going to be starting the new parak. We're starting the 5th parak of Eruvin. We are on the very bottom of Nun Bet Amud Bet. So we are going to be in this chapter, Ketzad Ma'abrin, how do you determine the boundaries of the city? We're going to be dealing a lot with. It's going to be a little bit technical because we're basically dealing with where does the city limits end for the purposes of where we can start measuring our tchum. So we have last part we talked about an individual and their tchum. Now we're talking about the city's tchum. So normally a person can walk 2,000 amot surrounding where they live. But if they're in a city, they also get the 2,000 amot start from the outside of the city. So you have to figure out where the city ends and how you draw the city boundaries. Because we'll discuss, because most cities aren't perfect spheres or aren't perfect circles or perfect squares. They're often a little messy. To figure out how to how to work it out so that way that will make sense, and that way we can actually have a clear boundary line where you can or can't walk. Because when we're talking simply about the individual and his house, it's pretty straightforward, right? You could just draw a circle right around it or a square, depending on whether you're the Chachamim or whether you are the or Eliezer, whether you draw again circle or square, as we were discussing. But now we're talking about the whole city, so the rules are going to be a little different. We're going to discuss, again, different parts of the city and what counts as part of the city versus already considered to be part of the fields. We're also going to be discussing over the course of the parak how to square. We're going to be talking about squaring it off. So we're going to talk about how that works, where you draw your straight lines. When we're measuring cities, we're not going to have cities of really weird shapes. There's either going to be circles or they're going to be squares. So we have to figure out how to turn it from, and then again, if it is a circle, then it gets squared. So we're going to figure out how do we make our cities into usable shapes for the purposes of Eruvin. And that's going to be this whole parak. It'll be a little technical. Please bear with me. Hopefully, it'll make sense. Okay, so we'll start reading the Mishnah. So Ketzad Ma'abrin Ta'ir, right? So how does one determine where the boundaries of the city are? Beit nichnas, Beit yotzei. One house is further in, one house is further out. Pigum nichnas, pigum yotzei. There are these nice. Here, so let me get let's get the Perish Chai open. I'll also have some other pictures to show everybody as well. But we'll start with the Perish Chai. Again, so we have this nice city, right? This one looks nice and pretty much square. So we're starting with, we have some houses, so the houses aren't quite even. Some are farther, some are shorter. But also we're going to notice there's the case of, so there are the pagums, and which is basically when you have a wall, if you've already been, let's say, the old city in your Chaim or any other old castle-like structure. So there's often places where it sticks out a little bit farther, different places where it's in. Those are called blemishes, pigumim, which basically just means indentations in or out. So then there also is the case of, there's also hayusham gedudi ot v'hoda saratachim. Also, you can also have the case that there's an old wall that fell down. So would you have some of those walls that are of different heights? Let's see. Do we have a? Here we go. Here, this is the Gidiyot. So this is simply a fallen down. Yeah, this is a fallen down house or fallen down wall. That'll also contribute to the distance. So then there also is a possibility of having Gesharim, which is when you have so that's one. Okay, so I'll finish the mission, then I'll point out all the things in order to be a little clearer. And then there also are these things called the Gesharim, which is various bridges. Also, have you ever seen, when you have like a raised arch from one part of the city to another part of the city, also be considered to be a bridge. Unifashot, which are the what's the best way to explain that? Nefashot would be the top of a grave. So here's one example of a nefesh. So again, we have that's actually a little more explanation. So let me just pull up. I have other diagrams about that. One moment, please. While I pull up my other diagrams. There's a lot of these guys. So here's them for nefesh. So I'm going to have to share another one. There we go. So let me stop share, and then I'm going to reshare another one. A moment, please. Here, so this is the one we had the other day. This was the tlum marker. The next one here, we're talking about a nefesh on top of the grave. So here are various different types all around the world of right, a nefesh kever. So we have the nefesh would be the structure on top. Again, many different types. So these you might notice as the Avshalom's tomb is the one on the top left, and to the left of that is that of the house of Zachariah's tombs. And then we have a more generic tomb bottom left of I can't remember where this is located. My apologies. Another one is here. And this is another type of grave. This is this is a mausoleum in Sicily. Again, so you see there's a nice big structure over that's all around just one grave. Okay, so now that we've got that, now let's go back and explain the backward. Now let's go back to that mission itself. Okay, so we talked when you're measuring the city, what comes into account. So we said houses they go in as they go out, various indentations of turrets or towers on the city fortifications. We discussed if you have a fallen down wall that used to be part of the city wall, but is no longer, but is at least still 10 tons tall. Spoke about various bridges that lead out of the city. Spoke about various mausoleums or types of graves. So when are the graves considered to be valid? Not if you simply have any grave that's valid. Rather, it has to be sheyesh behen BAYT. They have to have a guardhouse. They have to have somewhere where you could have lived, right? Which a lot of these places actually had, because they were, as much as people relied on there being curses on cities, also didn't really buy that. So they used to actually put up little guardhouses next to mausoleums or by graveyards. They would have somebody to actually live there and guard it, because you don't want somebody ransacking your ancestor's tomb, because
I just want to clarify. So are these structures, this broken down wall of the mausoleum, outside the city walls and yet extending the dimensions of the city?
Correct. These are all things that are on the borders of the city. Right? They're not in the city proper. If you're saying what is normally the city, you wouldn't put a grave in the middle of your city. People don't. That's not done. The fact that we have that is currently are graves in the middle of Yerushalayim is because Yerushalayim used to be much smaller. Again, over that you try and plan a graveyard, you typically aim for the edge of your town. Especially in regards
even Toronto's like that, right? Because Bathurst Lawn used to be outside of where people lived, and the cemeteries that are further north now, urban sprawl will expand to where those are as well.
Right. So typically people try and put them outside, because again, it's sometimes a little intense for people to have in the middle of the city. Also because typically the land is at a little bit higher premium inside the city than outside of the city. So again, as dear as the final resting place of their loved ones are, we also are a little bit realistic that they don't need as much protection as the living people do. They don't. Again, so that they won't, unless they have a usage for the city, right? So such as, again, so either their houses, their fortifications, even if they're not the greatest fortifications, but they still serve some degree of fortification, or if they're the bridges, or again the mausoleums that at least have a place that somebody could in theory live in. So those all we extend Mosian and Tamida Connectan. You extend the measurement for that side until that area. And then what do you do? The Osin Kamin Tavlam the Rabat Kdei Shehei Niskar Et Zavia. And we follow the Chacham's opinion that we're going to square the whole thing off. That way we get all the extra space. Now let me just share again the here we go. Here. So what would happen is, so here we go. So it's here. So again, so notice how, let's see here, there's one house outside. Instead of measuring from, where most of the city is going to have inhabitants are, instead you'll measure all the way from the edge. Right? So by where the BAYT would say, or again, that could be any of the things we mentioned in the first half of the Mishnah. And then we also, when we measure it, we also measure it in a way that we get the corners. Okay, so again, so we square it and then we measure it, and then we also add the corners. So we end up getting, again, 2,000 times 1.4 on the corners, because you get because you end up getting that extra distance. As far as orientation goes, we'll get to that in a little bit, not quite yet. Okay. And then as far as here, Rashi had said, right, when it says Vosinota, so he explains that you do it according to whichever direction it happens to be in before you add on the corners at the end. Right. So then, so say if your city is more rectangular, you will, right. So you'll again, you want to have a perfect square. You'll have when say like a tablet, it could be rectangular also. It doesn't have to be a square per se. You square it off like the corners, so right angles. And so again, so the better translation of Muruba'in isn't really square, but it's more like you rectangularize it. Okay. Yeah, but again, when we get to the shape of the city, we'll discuss, whether the city gets circled and then squared, or simply it's already a square. We'll get into that. If it gets a little sticky, let me know, and we'll try and see how that goes. Okay. Yeah. Please, if anybody misses anything, please feel free to chime in and ask me. I'm happy to repeat everything. We should have enough time to cover, because a lot of the dot are a little bit shorter now because there's a lot of measurements, and when you try and explain measurements in words, when Rashi and Tosfot are trying to explain it, it takes them a few more words than normal to explain. So we'll have time, not to worry. Okay, so now on to the Gemara. Rav u'Shmuel chad tani ma'abrin, chad tani ma'abrin. So one says ma'abrin with an ayin, and one says ma'abrin with an aleph. Okay, so the question is, which one is it, and what's the difference, and what does that mean? So ma'ad tani ma'abrin, that's the language of aver, limb by limb, meaning you'd measure it based on each individual limb. Ma'ad tani ma'abrin kisha ubara. Right, so what is it? Are we saying you're measuring all the limbs as part of it, or are we saying that it's as in a woman who is with child, right, when she is pregnant? So you say that we include the fact that that her stomach's sticking out a little bit, that also counts as part of her as well. We don't say that that doesn't count, and therefore you only get therefore she's only entitled when you're measuring the meters from a person, you're like, oh, another person, it's a different measurement. It's like, no, it's all the same person. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a case of, now we're going to get a little bit agadic. Okay, so now we're talking about question of how to, again, another etymological point between Rav and Shmuel. So Chad Amar, one says that there's one house within the other one, and one says Beit v'aliyah al-gabav. Another one says that there's a house with an attic on top. So the question is, when we say machpelah, meaning it's double, do we mean that it's is it a two-story? It's basically a two-story house going down, or is it simply a cave and then another cave? Bishlama Laman Amar Zal Gavzeh. So I understand going to say this one's on top of the other one. Okay. Hainu machpelah. That's why it is called double. So you're saying that it's actually one, it's just simply two different rooms in a larger cave structure. Going in, you go through one, then go to the next one. How is that considered to be doubled? So shakfula bezuga. So the answer is that it's because it's doubled in pairs. Meaning that there's a lot of different different couples throughout history who were buried there. So who are they? Mamre Kiryat Arba. The pasuk says Mamre Kiryat Arba Shechavron. So what does that mean? So the drasha on that pasuk is that Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, or Rabbi Yitzchak says Kiryat HaArba Zugod. It's the city of the four couples: Adam u'Chava, Avraham v'Sarah, Yitzchak v'Rivka, Yaakov v'Leah. That's the four couples were buried in Rat Machpelah, Adam and Chava, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, as well as Yaakov and Leah. Rachel is omitted as well; she died on the way, and that's why there's Rachel. Okay, so now we're going to go with some more differences between Rav and Shmuel and interpretations. Again, it looks like we're not going to get back to the rest of the day, I don't think, to actually get back to Eruvin, but that's okay, because this is how the Gemara flows. So Vahivi me Amrafel. Those are the days of Amrafel. This is what we're talking about in Reshit, when Abraham is going up against the four kings. So we say the time of Amrafel. So Ravu Shmuel Chadamar Nimrod Shmo. So the question is, who is this Amrafel? So Rav Shmuel argue. One says that it's Nimrod. Right? Nimrod was the first person to create a empire. So we said that Amrafel is really Bavel, and that Nimrod was the first one to create the first Babylonian empire, and that's who this is. Lama Nikra Shmo Amrafel. And why is his name Amrafel? Amar v'hipil Avraham Avinu b'totiv shana ish. He's the one who put Avraham Avinu into the fiery furnace. So again, the reason one of the Midrash on why Avraham had to end up leaving, as well as the cause of the death of Avraham's brother Haran, was this was all caused by Nimrod. Was at the time had been the ruler of the area around Ur Kasdim. He threw in Abraham into the fiery furnace, and then Abraham survived, but unfortunately Haran did not. Haran is not a full true believer like Abraham, therefore God did not protect Haran. And now the other says, why is it called Amrafel? Rather, his real name is the other way around. His real name is Amrafel, and Nimrod is a secondary title. Again, why was his name renamed to be Nimrod, even though his true name is really nearly Amrafel? Shehem read et kol ha'olam kulo Allah b'malchuto, because he had turned all of the world against God during his reign, because he was the one who spread his idolatrous ideas all across the lands that he conquered. But not only did he, was he a Gibor, he's also the one who led people astray and fought and rebelled against God. Okay, so that's the look at who was Amrafel. Again, they both agree that it's Nimrod. The question is, which was his real name, and what exactly he is known for, what terrible thing he's known for. Next, we have another one that'll hopefully be familiar to people. Vayakam Mel Chadash Al Mitzrayim Asher Lo Yadat Yosef. So again, now we're in the beginning of Sefer Shemot. When a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Yosef, so what does that mean? So Rav Shmuel Chadamar Chadash Ma'ash Chadamar Shechashug Zerotav. One says this is actually a new king. Another one, and then the other opinion says not that it's a new king, but that he changed his decrees. There used to be decrees that were along the lines of what Yosef had set forth and that were beneficial for people and for the Jews. And instead, this new king says, I want none of what Yosef did, and he pretends he never heard of, all of Yosef and his brilliant strategies. And instead starts being mean to the Jews and everybody else. So the one who says, why do they get to each conclusion? So you want to say it's a new king? Well, that's pretty easy to explain because it says Chadash. Manda Amar Shashub Zeratav. You want to say that he simply had new decrees. So how did that happen? Why would you say that and not that it's a new king? Because normally when we have a transition of kings, we say the previous one died. The fact the previous one didn't die implies that it's still the same king, just that he changed his mind. But if it's the same king, they simply change his mind. How does this work? Like, how could you not know Yosef? Like, he was really important. Everybody knew him. Like, everybody in the Middle East knew him. So what's going on? So my Shilu da Yosef, Dami Commandolo Yadale Yosef. Rather, not that he didn't know Yosef, but he pretended that he'd never heard of him. Right? No way you could forget, the vizier who changed the entirety of your economy and taxation policy and everything else. Unless you're like, have your head in the sand. The answer is he made like an ostrich. His head in the sand, and everybody is like looking at him like, I have no idea what you're doing. We can all see you, but whatever floats your boat, you're the king. So okay, so that's that story. And now we've got now we have some more stories, and again we are going to be we're got it, but now we're getting a little more back towards Eruvin. So okay, so then we have the Gemara. We have this thing that says Siman Shmona Esrei Shemasar Lamanu B'David Beit. Okay, so this is this is a mnemonic. If you were back at the time of the Gemara, prior to the time of the writing down of the Gemara, this is all done by memorization. So in order to help you remember what the next line of reasoning, so there are these mnemonics. So we will leave it at that, and we will again. Hopefully, you'll see that play out. The 18 and 12 we learned from David, and then he understood. And we'll see. Hopefully, this will make sense. If it doesn't make sense, also okay. Mnemonic. For some people that works great. For some people, they look at mnemonic and they're like, "I am very confused." So we'll see which camp we are in after we learn the following Gemara. So Amar B'Yochanan. Vonasar Yamim Yidalti Eitzel B'Oshia B'Ribi Ulamadati Mimenu El Devar Echad V'Shtatenu. So Rabbi Yochanan says that 18 days of Rabbi Oshia, who is great, B'Ribi, and I learned only one thing in regards to our Mishnah. What did I learn? It said Ma'abrin was an aleph and Ta'arim ba'aleph. Right? So again, when we say the word Ma'abrin, it's meant by limbs with an aleph. So Ini, is this really so? Ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shnei Masar Talmidim Hayulol Rabbi Yoshia B'Ribi. Shmona Sar Yamim Gidalti Benehem. L'madati Lev Kol Chad V'Chad V'Chachma Kol Chad V'Chad. So now we're confused. So you want to say fine to the aleph, I can understand that. But how can you say that you were there for 18 days and all you came away with is that one word from the Mishnah? You're there with 18 days and you met all of the Talmidim in his Beit Midrash. So how on earth did you leave only the Rabbi Yochanan say I only learned one thing? What? So Leiv Kol Chad V'Chad V'Chachma Kol Chad V'Chad Gemar. Right? So yes, he couldn't. So the word that is possible. He understood each and the wisdom of every one of them, but Mara Logamar. But he didn't learn any tradition that's different from any of them. Or he had many nice discussions in Torah and understood their perspectives, but he didn't necessarily learn any new traditions from them. But alternatively, Minayu Didu Gamar, Mine Dide Lo Gamar. So alternatively, you could say that there's only one original statement that he learned from. That was Rabbi Oshia's. But all right, so he only learned one. He learned many things, but only one thing that's actually attributed directly to Rabbi Oshia. Because again, Rabbi Oshia isn't only teaching his own Torah, he's probably teaching also the Torah of his Rebbeim as well. Therefore, most of the things he said weren't stated in his own name, so therefore they're already listed elsewhere in other Mishnayot and Beitot, so therefore there wasn't necessarily a new thing of Rabbi Oshia's. BAYT alternatively, Davar Echad Mishatenu Kamar. No, I mean I learned one thing that's relevant here. Not that I only learned one thing, because that would be a little silly. Rather, he learned one thing that's relevant to our discussion right now. That's what he was saying. So he was saying how crowded it was with students, Rabbi Yoshia, that they would sit 4 students sitting in one square amma, which is really tight. That's basically standing room only. Or if you've ever been sat on those really skinny seats at a bleacher somewhere and you're trying to cram it in, like that. So Amar Rebbe Shayinu Lamdim Torah Eitzel Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua Hayinu Yoshvim Shisha V'Ama. So then Rabbi Yehuda says that's nothing. When we were learning by Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, it was 6 people per square amma. That's just really tight. That's crammed on a subway during rush hour type crowding. Not very comfortable, but it happens. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yosha, Rabbi Doro, Krimeir Doro. So Rabbi Yochanan is saying the greatest Rabbi Yosha. He is in his generation, like Rabbi Meir was in his generation. Rabbi Meir Bedoro lo yachu chavarav lamod al sof dato. Just like with Rabbi Meir, he was so great that his friends couldn't properly understand his reasonings. Rabbi Yosha lo yachu chavarav lamod al sof dato. Similarly, for Rabbi Yosha, his colleagues could not fully grasp how profound his ideas were, which is both good and bad. It means it shows his greatness. On the other hand, it also shows how great he is, but it also belies the fact that people didn't fully understand everything that he had to add. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Liban Shal Rishonim. So you might recognize some of these phrases. So Rabbi Yochanan, Liban Shal Rishonim, Kipid Shal Ulam, V'Shal Achronim, Kipid Shal Echal, Va'anu Kimlo Nekev, Machat Bidkit. So similarly, Rabbi Yochanan said the hearts, meaning the wisdom and knowledge of the early sages, were like the doorway to the entryway of the Beit Mikdash, which we said was 20 by 40, going back to the first stop of the Masechet. And then the Achronim, meaning the later stages. Again, this is referring to different stages of Tanaim. We're not referring to the modern day Rishonim and Achronim. So we say that they were like Hechal, again, which is 10 by 20, so it's like half the size of the generation before them. However, we are like the eyes of a needle. So very, very small. So again, this is the, you read on Hadorah, saying how little we know compared to the previous generation. Rishonim, Rabbi Akiva, so who's the first one? That's Rabbi Akiva. Achronim, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. So we're referring to the early stage, referring to Rabbi Akiva, and we're saying later stage is referring to the following generation of students, but Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. So that's one option. Another one is Amikadamri, Rishonim, Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, Achronim, Rabbi Osha, Baribi. Alternatively, it's Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua and Rabbi Osha, Baribi. Va'anu kimlo nekev machat tzidkit. And we, on the other hand, are considered to be the eye of a fine needle. This is said by, again, Rabbi Yochanan, who is one of the early Amoraim. So Amar Abaye, va'anan ki sichta baguda lagamra. And Abaye said who's even a generation, who's even late, they've been a generation later than Rabbi Yochanan. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said, and we are like a peg in the wall. Meaning we are like if you ever tried to nail in a flat peg into a wall, it's really hard, makes a lot of force, and already kind of jam it in there. It doesn't really work very well. So that's how bad we are in our understandings, as opposed to the early generations where we're smooth and seamless. Now it's just tough. So Rava says we are like a finger in wax, meaning you can do it if you push hard enough, but it doesn't really work very well. If you ever tried pushing in a candle, it doesn't really go so well. It's a little mushy, but still not giving you as much give as you would want. If you try to put your hand into water, that's easy. If it's wax, and you're like, it's gonna hurt your finger. So Ravashi said we're like a finger in a pit in regards to forgetfulness, meaning so just like that's really easy to do. Put your hand into an empty pit. It's no effort. That's how quick we are to forget things, unfortunately. So So Amar of Yehuda Amarav Bnei Yehuda Shehikpidu Alashonam Nitkaimu Toratam Biadam. So Rav Yehuda, son of Rav, that the people of Yehuda, meaning the geographic region of Yehuda, were very careful about their speech, Therefore, all their Torah was endured and they remembered it. B'nai Galil Shalomik Pidu Alashonam Lonit Kama Toratam Biadam. The people who lived in the Galilee, who were not as particular about their speech and precise, they did not remember their Torah knowledge. What is it really talking about how particular you are in terms of your speech? Allah B'nai Yehuda Dedaiki Lishna Mitnachilahu Simana Nitkaima Toratan Biadam. Rather, people of Judea who were precise in their language also made excellent mnemonics, which helped them memorize things. But as in people of the Galil who were not so precise in terms of formulations and therefore of their languages, and therefore did not formulate mnemonics in the same way. Therefore, they had a harder time remembering it, and that's why they lost a lot of it. Their Torah did not endure. People of Judea said from one teacher, so they remembered it quite well. So people of Yehuda used to have one Rebbe they would learn from, therefore everything they learned was organized and they could remember it well, but people of Galil did not, and therefore they forgot everything. Because they had multiple teachers, with multiple teachers, it's harder to remember. Again, nowadays, things are different. Nowadays, most of verbatim are actually their books, not necessarily any individual. So again, harder for us to remember. So Ravina Amar Bnei Yehuda G'Galim Masechta Nidkaima Tartam Biadan. People who lived in Yehuda who used to publicly say in advance what we're going to be learning, so we can prepare. Therefore, everybody's able to remember it better. But people in the Gullah will not tell everyone what they're learning beforehand, and therefore people had a harder time understanding it. So David used to explain things in advance, but Shaul would not. But David But we know that David used to give advance warning, as it says, those who fear you will see me and be glad. So again, that means that you have feared and then seen means you have advance warning, and that's the way to understand it. Right, so wherever he turned himself, he did mischief. There's no lead up to it. It's simply going straight in, which means that he did not give any warning about what they're going to be learning. Okay, we're now on the BAYT. So B'Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Minayin Shemach Lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Alotan Avon Shenamar Machar Ata Vanacha Imi B'Mchitzati. So again, how do we know that eventually? How do we know that eventually God forgave Shaul for his sin? This is the killing of the city of Nov. So it says, tomorrow you and your children will be with me. Meaning Shmuel gave Shaul another chance after he slaughtered the Kohanim of Nov when he was trying to root out David. Which means you with me in my partition, meaning you will be able to be in Gan Eden with Shmuel. Amar Biaba, Ika Damashil Lahu Lubnei Yehuda Dak Kilashane Ma'abrin Tnan Ma'abrin Tnan Akuzu Tnan Yade. Now the Gemara goes back to our original discussion: is it Ma'aber with an aleph or with an ayin? And we say you should, if you really want to know the answer, you should ask somebody who's from the area of Yehuda. And if you want, also in regards to another Mishnah, we say the blemish of the firstborn animal. We say akuzo. Is that with an aleph or an ayin? Also, you should ask people of Yehuda; they will know. So Shalinu v'Amrulay. So actually, we went over to them and we asked them because they're very good at precision and remembering things. You get the Tani and Abrin. You get the Tani Ma'abrin. One teaching with an aleph, one with an ayin. You get a Tani akuzo. You get a Tani akuzo. Right. So we've got one with an aleph, one with an ayin. But actually, yes, there's two traditions, and we're kind of stuck. So when we say that they're precise, so what is that? They were precise and exacting in their language. What does that mean? So, for instance, if a person from Yehuda was going to say, I have a cloak to sell, then Amrulay, my Guan Talitcha, they ask what color is your cloak? Amrulu, Shradin ale adama. He says it is like beets on the ground, which is a very precise description of the color, which will help people know exactly what he's selling, even if they don't have it right in front of them. Galad Logash Gamesha Mahi was an example of how imprecise people of the Galilee were. Dahu Bar Galila, Hava Kazil Amar Lahu, Amar Laman, Amar Laman. So say who has an Amar, and Amar Lahu, La Shota. Foolish Galilean, Chamar lemerkav or Chamar lemishte. They say basically because when they pronounce things, so they slurred their words a lot. So you couldn't. This is an happens a lot with actually with Israelis nowadays. Go figure. So here talking between a het and an aleph, right? Because again, the word is again. So the word he meant to say isn't amar. He meant to say hamar, right? Or it could be amar, which is wool, or it could be imar, which is slaughter. So there's three words that could sound the same. That all like a lot of Israelis nowadays sometimes just swallow their hays because they don't fully formulate their the H sound properly. The sometimes just leave it, and then then kind of saying being haya comes aya and things like that. So so right. So which one? So again, so which one did you want? Did you want a Chamar, do you want a chamar? Did you want a chamor sarada? Did you want chamar like chamar medina, which is some sort of drink? Did you want an amar with an ayin, which is something you wear, or would you like an imar, which is a lamb which you want to slaughter? Yeah, and so they're basically making fun of their accent, and how their bad accents lead to not understanding, Torah or what they're saying properly. A certain person said, a woman who said to her friend, "Come and I'll feed you milk." And then, due to the precision of her word, what came out is instead of because she slurred the chaf with the chet, it sounded like my friend. Instead of that, can you give me? Let me give you milk. It said that she heard tochlich lavi, and because they lost the chet, and also the chaf and the dal got smushed together. So therefore, you got may a lioness eat you instead. So instead of inviting her over for a nice glass of milk, instead she invited her to be eaten by a lion. Not very nice. Okay, now we got more stories that belongs to Lano. So Hahi Itata, the after like I made the Dina. So one came to court once and Amrlai, Mari Kiri, Tafla Haviti, Li, Gandvun Min. So she meant she meant to say, I had a board and they stole it from me. But the problem is that because she was imprecise, right, her all right, so the tablet became a tafla, and then the right, so instead it became right, so instead of being master, instead of becoming master, the Mr. and Sir became master, my servant. Then it became a beam instead of a board. And they stole you from me because the improper inflection got it ugnavech mean as opposed to ganvu mini. So yeah, and so they got it entirely backwards. Menachad shad ruin aloi, and it was so large that shadru aloi lo mati karat ara. And it was so large that when they would hang you upon it, your feet would not touch the ground. So it went from being they stole a very large board from me. Instead it came basically that I had a beam, and they stole it from you instead, and that the beam that they stole from you was big enough that you would have hanged it upon, which is a very mean thing to say. So on the other hand, we have people from Yehuda Amata to Rebbe, because Rebbe Yehuda Nasi is from Yehuda. Rebbe Kihal Mishdai B'Lashon Chachma. She would say it more precisely. Amra Alat Nekafat Bachad Yidon Nishrei Lekinyahon. Right. So she would speak enigmatically. So she would say the ladle used for drawing wine from the jug is already knocking against the bottom of the jug, meaning the wine of the jug is almost empty. And she would also say Let the eagles fly in their nests when it's time for, meaning that they should go home now because we're out of food. And when they were, and when everyone people to sit, she would also answer in euphemisms. She would say, "Avamar yaide v'ta'ar zavrei minei v'takvei alat b'chad kilfa de'al l'biyam." So similarly, she would say to them, "Let's remove this stuff from another jug and let the ladle float the jug like a ship sailing in the sea, because now it's time for the next group to come in." Okay. All right, that was sorry. Yes, yeah, so that was the phrase for the one them to sit and to start to learn. That's the phrase you would say. Let's open up another barrel. We can all start. Yeah, some of these don't fit so much in modern day parlance. Okay, let's see. So we're going to be able to. There's a whole bunch more. Okay, it looks like we're going to be out of time. So hopefully we'll be able to catch up tomorrow. Again, there's a little bit longer of a prelude, even though we're not going to quite get to the measurement parts. This is all a gadata of interesting languages and and idioms, which takes a little longer to get through than I expected. So again, we'll pick up from here tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to get through a little bit quicker. Again, we could have done start with an intro in general to the parak, but for the next little bit, we're still going to be doing various one-off stories about language, which is going to get a little confusing. I don't really have a better way of explaining that besides there's just a lot of little stories, which will hopefully explain as they come up. Again, since we're out of time today, we'll hopefully have enough time to catch up tomorrow, and hopefully we'll go a little bit quicker. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
You too.